All right, so the disappearance of Natalie Perez. It's a case that, well, it just grabs you, doesn't it? I mean, you want answers, and to be honest, so do we.
What gets me about this case is it's not just about like one missing person, you know. It's like this huge reminder of how easily someone can just disappear, especially when you're talking about something like human trafficking.
Yeah. And we're going deep on this one.
Oh yeah, we're going all in using a true crime podcast episode, a really good one, as our main source.
And it's complicated. This is going to be a tough one. It's a story about a young woman,
Natalie Perez.
just 19 years old, an aspiring singer. I mean, full of dreams, right? From Sebring, Florida, she moved to Miami back in January of 2012, hoping to make it big, in the music scene.
Yeah, but instead of finding fame, she found something else, a much darker side of Miami.
And what makes it even more unsettling is the lack of media coverage.
Yeah.
It's like this case just slipped through the cracks.
It did. And it makes you think, how many other stories like this are out there? Stories we never hear about.
It's a reminder for all of us. We need to pay attention. We need to demand justice for the people whose voices are so often silenced.
Yeah. We need to remember that we're talking about a real person, a young woman with hopes and dreams. Natalie, someone's daughter, someone's friend. As we go through the facts of this case, let's try to be sensitive, respectful of her and her family.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the beginning. Natalie's move to Miami was kind of orchestrated by this friend of hers, a singer named Crystal.
Crystal claimed she had all these connections in the music industry.
She even had, legitimate credentials. She had been featured on a Grammy-nominated album.
And that's the thing about trafficking.
Yeah.
These perpetrators, they often present themselves as successful, trustworthy. Like they use their achievements to build this rapport.
Like they create this illusion of opportunity.
Exactly. And then they use that to manipulate and control
I
people.
think it's so messed up.
And in Natalie's case, that illusion was shattered on Valentine's Day 2012.
Oh, wow.
She made this frantic phone call to her cousin, Roberto Jr., saying she'd been assaulted at this super fancy hotel in Miami.
It's chilling because Roberto Jr. actually knew Crystal. She was his ex-girlfriend. And he had already expressed concerns about their friendship.
Oh yeah, especially because Crystal was hanging out with this guy named Sam who had a pretty long and disturbing criminal history.
So Roberta Jr. went to the hotel with some friends to get Natalie. And when they got there, they found her, well, she was visibly traumatized. She had physical injuries that backed up her claims of being assaulted.
Yeah, she had a chunk of her hair torn out, blood on her face, and her fingernails were torn. It was bad.
Just awful. You can't imagine the terror she must have felt.
It's hard to even think about. And despite the evidence, the situation just got worse.
Really?
Yeah, when the police arrived, Sam, Crystal, and Natalie, they all gave completely different stories about what happened. Total chaos.
So no one was arrested?
No, it was just a mess of conflicting information, and the police, they didn't know who to believe.
That's incredibly frustrating. For Natalie and her family, it must have felt like a total betrayal. Like the system failed them.
And that's unfortunately common in trafficking cases.
Yeah.
Victims, they're often afraid to come forward, and even when they do, their stories are often dismissed. Like no one believes them.
It's just awful. So after this, Natalie's family brought her back home to Sebring, trying to give her a safe place, right?
Yeah, a place to recover.
And it was there, away from all the craziness of Miami, that Natalie finally told her Aunt Maria the truth. The truth about what had really happened to her.
And this is where we start to understand how these traffickers operate.
Go on.
That glamorous party Crystal took her to, it was a trap.
What?
Natalie and another young woman were drugged and raped by multiple men. And after the assault, Natalie's ID and birth certificate were stolen.
Likely by Crystal.
Most likely. It's classic trafficker tactic. They steal your ID so you can't escape. You're trapped.
It's a way to completely control someone to make them feel utterly helpless.
Exactly. And Natalie's story only gets worse. She was forced into sex work, sold to men all over Miami.
This Sam guy, he was the one behind it all, right?
Yeah. Sam was the mastermind. He controlled everything. Natalie's life, her movements, her money. He used threats, violence, you name it.
The level of control is it's mind-blowing. It's hard to comprehend how one person can have so much power over another.
And it wasn't just physical. These traffickers, they manipulate your mind. They make you believe you have no options, that you deserve the abuse.
So Natalie's back in Sebring, trying to heal from this horrific experience. But the nightmare's not over yet, is it?
No, it's not. A few weeks later, Crystal shows up in Sebring. She had Natalie's stolen ID and birth certificate with her.
You think she was going to give them back?
Nope. She held on to them, keeping that control over Natalie.
It's like she was dangling this false promise of freedom while keeping her trapped.
Exactly. And it's complicated,
Yeah.
We have to consider that Crystal, she might have been a victim herself at some point, maybe coerced into becoming part of the problem.
This victim-turned-perpetrator cycle, it's something we see often in these cases. It's heartbreaking.
We don't know exactly what happened during that visit, but shortly after, Natalie went back to Miami with Crystal.
She went back. Why?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It suggests that Natalie was either forced or manipulated into going back to the place where she was so terribly abused.
And to make things even crazier, there's a twist involving Crystal's niece.
Oh, yeah. Shortly after Natalie and Crystal moved in with Crystal's sister, the niece disappeared.
What happened?
Well, a few weeks later, she reappeared and told this horrifying story about being kidnapped and trafficked.
Are you serious? So Crystal's niece was trafficked.
That's what she said. And it raises some serious questions about Crystal's involvement. Trafficking her own niece.
Especially considering Miami-Dade County has one of the highest rates of human trafficking in the entire country. It makes you wonder how deep this whole thing goes.
You start to see how these networks operate. They're hidden in plain sight.
And then there's Alex Lonars, the guy Natalie met at the apartment complex back in Miami. They continued to date even after everything that happened. They were living in these pay-by-hour motels along Southwest 8th Street.
An area known as Cayo, notorious for trafficking activity.
And Alex, his past is pretty troubling. Criminal history, convictions for drug possession, even firing a weapon into a building.
There were allegations of domestic violence, too.
It makes you wonder about his role in all of this. Was he involved in trafficking Natalie, or was he just taking advantage of her vulnerability?
It's hard to say for sure, but his presence in her life definitely raises some red flags.
So many red flags in this case. What are your initial thoughts so far? What's standing out to you the most?
Honestly, the manipulation, it's everywhere. Crystal, especially, she's like this friend and manipulator all rolled into one. Someone who's offering support while simultaneously controlling Natalie's every move. It's messed up.
It really is. It makes you wonder what was going through Natalie's mind. Why would she trust someone like Crystal after everything that happened?
That's what we need to figure out. We need to delve deeper into those tactics, see how they impacted Natalie's decisions, because ultimately those decisions led to her disappearance. So we left off with Natalie going back to Miami with Crystal, a decision that, just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you'd think she'd want to get as far away from that world as possible.
But that's the thing about trauma. It can really mess with your head, affect your choices. And remember, Natalie's family, they didn't know the whole story at this point.
Right. She had only told her aunt, Maria, so they were worried, but they couldn't fully grasp what she'd been through.
Exactly. And that lack of information becomes even more crucial when you consider what happens next. June 2nd. Natalie's mom, Anna, she gets a call from Alex.
Uh-oh.
He tells her that Natalie's gone. Vanished.
Wait, gone? What do you mean gone? Like disappeared?
Poof. No trace.
And what did Alex say happened?
That's where things get really, really weird. His story about Natalie's disappearance, it's all over the place, full of holes and inconsistencies.
Like what?
Well, first, he says she left their motel room on Friday night, got a phone call, and never came back.
Okay, but...
But he tells a different story to Natalie's sister, says they had a fight, and she left while he was sleeping.
So which is it?
And then, when he talks to the police, he claims she went to a friend's house, but he can't remember the friend's name.
It's like he's making it up as he goes along. None of it adds up.
Right. And get this, when Natalie's family finally gets her stuff back from Alex, her purse is missing.
Her purse.
Yeah, and they're adamant. They say Natalie never went anywhere without her purse. Ever.
So where is it?
Well, it eventually turns up. But guess what? Alex claims it was at a friend's house the whole time.
Oh, come on. Another friend whose name he can't remember. That's just too convenient.
Right. It just doesn't make sense.
So you've got a missing woman, a boyfriend with a shady past and a tendency to change his story, and a missing purse that magically reappears. What did the police do about all of this?
Well, that's the frustrating part. Natalie's family, they reported her missing to the police. They called the human trafficking hotline, but they were met with indifference. It was like no one cared.
It's just heartbreaking. You can only imagine how desperate they must have felt.
It's sadly a common experience for families of trafficking victims. They often face disbelief, a lack of understanding from law enforcement.
Like their concerns are just brushed aside.
Yeah, like they're overreacting. Or sometimes even worse, they blame the victim. Say they made their own choices.
That's just wrong.
It is. And in this case, it gets even worse. One detective actually suggested to Natalie's aunt that the best thing that could happen to Natalie would be if she got arrested for prostitution.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah. It's like they're blaming her for being exploited.
That's messed up.
It is. It shows a complete lack of understanding of how trafficking works. The control, the coercion. These victims, they don't have choices.
So what did Natalie's family do? They couldn't just sit around and wait, right?
No, they didn't. They took matters into their own hands. They started their own investigation.
Really? What did they do?
They were putting up flyers, going to nightclubs Natalie used to go to, desperately searching for clues on social media.
Wow. I can't imagine the strength it took to do all of that while dealing with such a devastating loss.
They were determined to find her, refused to give up hope.
Now remember, Sam, the guy Natalie said was involved in trafficking her.
The one with the long rap sheet.
Yeah, he was in jail at the time. Probation violation from a separate incident.
And the details of that case, they're eerily similar to Natalie's story.
How so?
He was accused of abusing and exploiting another woman, we'll call her Jane, forcing her into sex work, controlling her every move.
Sounds familiar.
The judge even recognized this pattern of abuse, called Sam out on it, sentenced him to 2 more years in prison. But here's the thing.
What?
Natalie's case, it was never mentioned during those hearings.
Why not? It seems like a missed opportunity to connect the dots.
There could be legal reasons. Bringing up unrelated allegations could have jeopardized the case against Sam.
That makes sense, but it's still frustrating.
It is. It's like Natalie's case was overshadowed.
Now, what about that SD card? The one Natalie gave her mom for safekeeping.
Oh, yeah, the SD card.
Yeah.
Months later, Anna finds it and contacts the Miami police. She thinks it might have important information about Natalie.
I mean, it's got to be worth a shot, right?
For sure. It was a potential lifeline. A way to maybe understand Natalie's life before she vanished.
Did they find anything on it?
Well, that's the mystery. There are these conflicting reports. Some say it was just personal stuff, selfies, videos. Others claim there were hidden files, images of women being trafficked by Sam and his crew.
That would be huge. If they could prove that, it would be a game changer.
It would. But there's a problem.
What now?
The SD card, it's gone. Disappeared. No one knows what happened to it.
Seriously, they lost the evidence.
It vanished during the investigation.
Mm.
Whether it was mishandled, accidentally lost, or intentionally concealed, who knows?
That's just unbelievable. It's like every time there's a chance to get some answers, something happens to sabotage it.
And then while the police were trying to figure out the SD card situation, they decided to talk to Crystal. She's back in Sebring, living with her mom.
Yeah.
Shortly after that interview, she disappears too.
Wait, Crystal vanished? This is getting weirder by the minute.
Her mom calls Natalie's family, says Crystal was abducted.
Abducted? Are you serious? This whole thing sounds like a bad movie.
And her story is all over the place. She calls her mom, says she was taken to Miami for a concert, then Puerto Rico, then that someone disabled her phone's GPS. It was chaos.
So was she really kidnapped, or was this some kind of elaborate prank?
Honestly, it was hard to tell. The police finally find her, and she downplays everything. Says it was all misunderstanding, a prank gone wrong.
A prank? Who would do that? It's too creepy.
Right. It just doesn't add up. Natalie's family, they think it was all a ploy, a way to shift the focus away from Crystal and Sam.
To create confusion, muddy the waters.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, even if Crystal was a victim at some point, it doesn't mean she couldn't be involved in Natalie's exploitation.
That whole victim-turned-perpetrator thing, it's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. But it happens.
So we've got conflicting stories, missing evidence, a potential suspect behind bars. Where did the investigation go from there?
Well, Natalie's family was getting nowhere with the police, so they turned to the Anti-Predator Project.
Who are they?
There's this nonprofit organization that specializes in missing persons and trafficking cases.
They sound like they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they brought a whole new level of expertise to the investigation. And one of the first things they uncover, a huge red flag.
What was it?
Natalie had opened a bank account right before she vanished. And guess what? Someone had closed it out about a month after she disappeared.
Someone had access to her account. That's not good.
It points to potential financial exploitation, which is common in trafficking. The Anti-Predator Project, they tried to talk to Crystal, but she wasn't very helpful. First, she pretended not to speak English well. Then she said she was afraid of Sam.
Sounds like she was hiding something.
Right. They did, however, manage to talk to Jane, the woman who testified against Sam. She hadn't met Natalie, but she confirmed Sam's pattern of abuse, confirmed he was deep into the sex trade.
So even though there's no direct link, her testimony supports the idea that Sam was running a trafficking ring and that Natalie might have gotten caught up in it.
Exactly. And Jane, she revealed something interesting about how Sam operated.
What was that?
He'd offer to help owners of these fancy condos that were facing foreclosure in exchange for letting him use their places to house the women he was exploiting.
Wow, that's pretty clever and disturbing.
It is. Shows how resourceful he was, how he could manipulate situations to his advantage.
So the Anti-Predator Project, what did they think happened to Natalie?
They believe Crystal lured her to Miami with the intention of trafficking her. And they even suspect that she might have set Natalie up to be killed on Sam's orders.
Killed.
Your kid.
There's a chilling possibility.
To think that someone Natalie considered a friend could be involved in something so horrific, it's hard to wrap your head around it.
That's how these traffickers work. They prey on trust, turn the people they exploit into accomplices.
So what happened with Sam? Was he ever questioned about Natalie?
The Anti-Predator Project, they decided to confront him. He'd been released from prison and was working at a car dealership.
Did he talk to them?
He did. At first, he claimed he had nothing to do with Natalie's disappearance. Said he was in jail at the time.
Right.
But then he says something really creepy.
What?
He suggests that maybe Natalie was killed for talking to the police about the sex trade.
Whoa. Hold on. Sounds like a threat. Or maybe even a confession. Right. It's like he was trying to shift the blame.
So what did the Anti-Predator Project do?
They told the police, and a federal agent went to question Sam again.
Yeah.
Sam clammed up, refused to talk, and said to contact his lawyer.
Typical.
It does make you wonder what he's hiding.
But there was some good news, right? Didn't you say something about the Florida statewide prosecutor's office getting involved?
Yes. They opened an investigation into Natalie's case in 2016.
Finally. Someone's taking this seriously.
It's a sign that maybe they're starting to see the bigger picture, that this might be more than just a missing person case.
But as of now, the case is still open and Natalie's still missing.
The Anti-Predator Project, they haven't given up. They think Crystal is the key to all of this. She's the one link to everyone involved.
Natalie, Sam, Arlix. Even the guy who returned Natalie's purse.
If she would just talk, maybe they could finally break this case open.
And there's that lead about Crystal's niece, the one who was trafficked. She said she heard her trafficker mention Natalie's name. Said he had her purse.
Right, and that trafficker, they think it might be Arlex's friend, the one who owns the barbershop.
Wait, the same guy who gave Natalie's purse back?
It's a long shot, but it could be a connection.
This whole case is it's mind-boggling. So many twists and turns. Natalie's disappearance, it's more than just a missing person case, isn't it?
It's about exploitation, manipulation, maybe even a cover-up. And it shows just how dark things can get in these seemingly glamorous industries.
Yeah. And it reminds us that this is happening everywhere, even in places you wouldn't expect.
So as we head into the final part of this deep dive, the big question is why? Why did Natalie disappear?
Was it personal? Or was she silenced to protect something bigger?
We need to look at everything, the motives, the role of law enforcement, the systemic issues that allow trafficking to flourish.
And we need to remember Natalie, this young woman with dreams who got caught up in something terrifying. We'll do our best to make sense of it all in our final analysis. We've been trying to piece together what happened to Natalie, and man, it's a twisted story.
It really is. And when you look at all the information, or the lack of information, I guess, you can't help but wonder about the why. The motive behind it all.
Yeah, like, was this personal? Was it about silencing her to protect something bigger? I mean, remember what Natalie said about her clients?
Yeah, she claims some of them were powerful people, police officers, lawyers, even judges.
If that's true, it's terrifying. And it might explain why some people weren't so keen on digging too deep into her disappearance.
Right, like who wants to investigate their own colleagues? It's a kind of conflict of interest, for sure.
And it makes you lose faith in the system, you know? The idea that someone could be protected just because of their position, it's wrong.
It really erodes public trust. Like, who do you turn to when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones involved?
Exactly. And Natalie's case, it brings up this bigger issue. How we treat victims of trafficking who are over 18.
Oh, yeah. There's this misconception that adults in the sex trade are choosing to be there, that they're not really victims.
Which is just ridiculous.
It is. It completely ignores the coercion, the manipulation. These are complex situations, and it's not always a clear-cut choice.
In Natalie's family, they fought so hard just to get someone to listen. They faced disbelief, indifference, even blame. It's awful.
It highlights this need for change. We need better training for law enforcement. They need to recognize the signs, understand the complexities of victimization.
And more resources for victims. We can't just brush this under the rug.
Absolutely. And we need to talk about it
Yeah.
openly and honestly. Raise awareness about how these traffickers operate.
So people know the signs, so they can speak up if they see something.
Exactly. It's not just happening in some far-off land. It's happening here in our communities.
And we have to support the organizations fighting against it. Groups like the Anti-Predator Project, they're doing amazing work.
They really are, giving a voice to the voiceless.
So where do things stand now with Natalie's case?
Sadly, we still don't know what happened to her. The case is open, but there haven't been any major breaks.
But the Anti-Predator Project, they're still working on it, right?
Yeah, they're not giving up. They're still following leads, trying to get Crystal to talk.
She's really the key to all of this, isn't she?
She is. She could have answers that no one else has.
And what about Arlex?
He's still in prison, but he's due to be released in a few years.
Do you think he'll talk then?
Maybe. The Anti-Predator Project, they plan to try again. See if he's willing to share what he knows.
Well, we can only hope. This case, it's been a tough one. Natalie's story, it's a reminder of how easily someone can disappear, how vulnerable people can be exploited.
And it's a reminder that we have to fight back. We have to speak up, raise awareness, and demand justice.
For Natalie and for all the victims of trafficking out there.
We can't bring her back, but we can make sure her story is heard. And we can work towards a world where this doesn't happen anymore.
If you have any information about Natalie's case, please contact the Anti-Predator Project. Their hotline number is 305-796-4859.
You can also find more information on our website, along with resources for trafficking victims.
Don't stay silent. Speaking up could save a life.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll keep digging, and hopefully, one day, we'll get justice for Natalie.